of little things for you. So just to let you know, the meeting is this event this evening is going to be recorded. So please don't do your own recording or take any photos while we're here. Can you all please also put yourselves on mute if you're not speaking? And you're very welcome to turn off your videos if you'd like to. Just to say, we won't be discussing any individual cases tonight, but if you do have any issues or any questions that you want to ask, you're more than welcome to drop us an email afterwards, and we'll gladly help you get them answered. All right. So I'm going to hand you over to Adam, who's going to give an introduction to this evening's festivities. So thank you very much. Take it away, Adam.
Good evening. So I can hear somebody talking in the background, which would suggest to me that not quite everyone's on mute. So if you could make sure you are, that would be great. My name's Adam Finn. I'm a children's doctor, a paediatrician, working at the Children's Hospital in Bristol and also employed by the University of Bristol. And I take enormous pleasure in being given the privilege to introduce this session very briefly this evening, really about vaccine research in Bristol and putting it into the context of what we do across the United Kingdom in terms of developing new vaccines. I think the first thing to say is that the United Kingdom, I don't think I can quite say has the very best immunization program in the world, but it's certainly among the best. And the other countries that I'm aware of that come close to us or exceed us are all very much less populous countries in other parts of Europe. So we do have an extremely effective vaccination program, and we can be justly proud of that. And the reasons for that are several. There's a central, very evidence-based policy development, centralized commissioning and purchasing of vaccines, and then local delivery through the NHS in primary care, in general practices throughout the country, with very good associated record keeping and good surveillance of vaccine preventable disease. And all of that culminates in us having a very high coverage vaccination program without anyone actually being compelled to have any vaccines at all, which is in contrast to some other developed countries. So there's great public trust in our NHS and in the vaccine program that we deliver. And of course, that it has been until very recently almost entirely in children, with a small amount of vaccination for the elderly population. You'll hear later about how that has changed in the last 2 or 3 years with the arrival of COVID. But the UK is also a world leader in vaccine clinical trials, and a lot of those historically have been in children. Back in the 1990s, that research was being done mostly in Oxford and also in Sheffield, where I was based, and we did a number of studies of new vaccines for the childhood programme during that decade. And then in the early 2000s, after I moved to Bristol, we began to set things up here in the city of Bristol, alongside not only Oxford, but also other centres in London and in Southampton, forming a really tight network of collaborating groups within the NHS and the universities doing these trials jointly and in partnership with each other, so that we could get these vaccines trials done, whether they were publicly funded or funded by industry needing to do licensure studies of their new vaccines. The next thing that happened that really helped was the foundation of the National Institute for Health Research. So the government of the day understood that putting a lot of research money into teaching hospitals without really accounting for what they were doing with it was not efficient. And so they instead routed research money through this newly created institute. And part of that was used to set up a clinical research network. And in fact, one of the networks that was set up across the country was the Medicines for Children Research Network. And we're fortunate in Bristol and the Southwest to be one of the areas funded by that network. And that gave us a great deal of resources to set up a collaborative group of centres, not just in Bristol, but right the way across the Southwest Peninsula doing these trials. And so during that decade, we did a number of studies of combination vaccines and different schedules, particularly in very young children in infancy and in the first and second year of life. And then in 2009, along came the previous pandemic, which most of you will remember. It was obviously much less of a catastrophe than the more recent COVID pandemic, but nevertheless, it caused a great deal of concern at the time, particularly because we didn't at the time have any suitable vaccines for children, and we weren't in any way aware of how serious this new strain of influenza was going to be in children. And the four centres I've mentioned, Bristol, Oxford, Southampton and St George's, put their heads together, and we very rapidly conducted trials of 2 flu vaccines in children. And there was very much the same sort of wartime work together attitude taken by staff in Bristol and the other centres. We did these trials on the weekends. There were many local families who volunteered their children to be in these studies. And we got safety and immunogenicity data on these two different vaccines extremely rapidly, so that we could deploy them during the year following the start of the flu pandemic. In the 2010s, we got involved in a lot more studies in adolescents, and so that meant doing studies in schools. And again, a number of the schools around Bristol very enthusiastically joined in and supported us as we looked at meningococcal vaccines and meningococcal carriage. And I can see Justin Harford here on the call, who was one of the local senior teachers who very much helped us and collaborated with us in setting up those studies across his school and other schools in Bristol as well. We also were conducting more studies in very young children, and we got into looking at the epidemiology in infants of a viral infection called rotavirus, for which we knew there was a vaccine coming. And we were able from Bristol to do some of the key work in showing how effective that vaccine would be and how much it would eliminate this very troublesome infection, which we had epidemics of with admissions to hospital every winter. We also started doing studies in nurseries, looking at viral infections and bacterial infections and their interrelationship using the nasal flu vaccine, which by then was being used in children. And in fact, that program of work is still ongoing at the moment. And then finally, along came the need to start thinking about vaccines in adults. We had a new vaccine against hepatitis B. We've had hepatitis B vaccines for many years. But this is a new development, a new and more immunogenic vaccine. And with the arrival of the request to do that study, also arrived Dr. Rajeka Lazarus, who'd been doing her PhD, they call it a DPhil in Oxford, where she'd been working. And she'd been appointed as an infectious disease doctor here in Bristol and came to me interested in doing adult vaccine studies. So that was extremely convenient, because I was being asked to do this adult vaccine study. I needed an adult doctor, and she took it over and did a very efficient job of running it. So that kind of got us up and running in Bristol, doing studies in adults as well as in children. And that put us in the position that we were in coming towards the end of the decade and into 2020, when along came COVID. And I think you're going to hear more about that from Rajeka and possibly others on the call. But very shortly after the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, I received a phone call from Andy Pollard, now Professor Sir Andrew Pollard, who was involved in the development of the Oxford vaccine that became the AstraZeneca vaccine, requesting that we set things up in Bristol to do the phase 1 study of that vaccine. And well, the rest is history. There's a lot more to say about what went on. And I can see faces on this call that were very involved in that and the subsequent work that we did over the last 3 years towards the highly successful program of vaccination that we managed to achieve, and which has massively reduced the death count and the illness count from that pandemic in the United Kingdom. So with that little summary of the history of the last couple of decades, I'd like to hand over to Rajeka, who's going to pick things up from here. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that introduction, Adam. And that's right, I'm going to pick up the story from about 2020, and I'm going to talk about how Bristol helped develop a COVID-19 vaccine in less than a year. And a lot of you would have heard recently or during the early part of the pandemic, it takes about 10 years to make a vaccine, but yet the COVID-19 vaccines were developed in less than a year. And this has raised lots of questions of exactly how that was done and how it was done safely. So there are several stages to vaccine development. This includes the discovery of the types of vaccines that we can use, which can take between 5-10 years, the early safety testing, which is typically performed on animals in a highly considered way before it can be tested on humans, which can take a couple of years. And then the clinical testing, which in itself is divided up into different stages, but this is when the vaccine is given to people and then made sure that it is safe, and then made sure that it works before it can go any further. So what happened? So several things happened. When the pandemic arrived, a lot of the discovery had already been done. The Oxford team had similar vaccines to the one that they used to develop for COVID-19 vaccine. They'd had vaccines for coronavirus themselves, and there have been other groups who've been trying to perfect an mRNA vaccine for years. So that probably took away the first 5 years or so of this 10-year vaccine journey. And then I think for the most part, it was really to do with collaboration, a shared purpose, and a lot of hours put in. So when COVID-19 was identified, it was isolated in China, but the information and the virus itself was shared really quickly with researchers and doctors around the world, so they could use that information to develop a vaccine. Governments gave money to develop a vaccine because there didn't seem very many options of how we were going to get out of the pandemic at that time. Doctors and nurses and others who work in clinical trials like us stopped everything else and focused on just running the trials. And we did this 7 days a week for months and months and months. And really importantly, the trials would not have been possible without the people who volunteered. And thousands of people around the world came forward to take part in these trials. And in Bristol alone, we had 1,200 volunteers that took part in the very first COVID-19 vaccine studies. Finally, the regulators who make sure that the trials are done safely also put all their focus on the COVID-19 vaccines, and again worked 7 days a week and made sure that they can look at the information as soon as it was available, so they can make sure that we were safe to move on to the next stage. So quite typically, there are gaps between each of the stages that I've mentioned, and usually you'd have to get through one stage before you start on the other, but because there really wasn't very much time, then all the stages were planned as they went along, but we didn't know whether we would make it from one stage to another because we needed to make sure that we were safe to do so. But fortunately, we were able to proceed. And then we were in the middle of a pandemic, so that meant we could actually see whether the vaccine was working or not. To test whether a vaccine works, volunteers are given the test vaccine, a new vaccine, or a dummy, which could be an injection of salty water or another vaccine that we don't expect to work. And then we see whether those who have been given the vaccine get the infection or not. So this can take a very long time if there's not a lot of infection around or it's hard to test for the infection. So we started this study. Our very first participant was vaccinated in Bristol on the 22nd of April 2020. And lockdown had started almost a month before. So on the 26th of March was when the first lockdown started in the UK. So it was a time where people were at home and could come in, and we're going to hear from one of our volunteers after I finished telling this story about how it felt. So it meant that people could come forward, but it also meant that the rates of COVID-19 infection went down. So that was great. So for the general public, and great for our volunteers as well, because we had asked volunteers to come and see us if they had a cough, lost their sense of smell or taste, or a fever. And over the next few months, there were people who came to see us with these symptoms during the lockdown, but no one tested positive for COVID-19. So at this point, it didn't seem likely that we were going to be able to work out whether the vaccine was was going to work or not. But in September, when the lockdown was lifted, more and more people started to come forward with symptoms. And one Friday, I saw 3 people, and 2 out of those 3 people were positive. And then thereafter, the numbers of people testing positive started to increase, and it became quite apparent that we had fewer cases of people with COVID and symptoms in those who had been vaccinated. And this was happening around the world for others testing vaccines, which meant by November 2020, the first vaccines for COVID-19 were ready for use. And as a result, 20 million lives have been saved. So what I'm going to do now is welcome Justin Harford, who was one of our volunteers in our COVID-19 vaccine studies. And I'm just going to ask him a few questions. So Justin, kind of first of all, would you just like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Well, good evening, everybody. Yes, I mean, Adam mentioned me briefly earlier. I guess that the journey with vaccines started. I'm a school teacher here in Bristol, biology teacher and a head of sixth form. And so we've done some work together with our sixth forms getting vaccinated for a number of years before the pandemic arrived. So I was already very ready to get involved whenever I could going forward. So yes, I'm delighted to be here this evening to share some thoughts and maybe answer some questions later on and allay how easy the whole process was for me.
Great, thank you. So can you tell us then how you first found out about the trial?
Well, it's very simple. I was in the garden with my wife. Obviously, lockdown was going on. I'm not sure if we were teaching lessons from home at that point, but we were relaxing in the evening. And my wife's a nurse, and she didn't mind me talking about her this evening as well. So we got a message through Facebook from a friend, and almost straight away we thought, well, this is something we want to do. This is something we can actually do, rather than sitting here. So we put our details in. And I think within a couple of days we got a call from you guys, and yeah, it was very, very simple. Very polite lady on the end of the phone asked us a few questions, and then we headed in and to have I think with the initial blood test, wasn't it, to find out whether or not we'd had COVID already, which was already intriguing, I think, from both of us as a biology teacher and as a nurse. It was just a really interesting process from the outset. And I guess Adam mentioned it earlier. I think you might have touched on it. I mean, just listening to you two talking already, the trust for me is the trust in science. To think that we wouldn't be at that stage in the trial process unless all the safety areas had been looked into. And then it was a no-brainer, really, I suppose, from a selfish point of view, that we were either going to get, as it turned out, the COVID vaccine or the meningitis vaccine that the youngsters get, and we hadn't had before.
That's great. And how was your experience in taking part in the study? Was there anything that you found particularly challenging or more straightforward than you would have imagined?
It was very straightforward, really, just turning out. I mean, it wasn't far from here at school, so just walked over the hill, and always a very friendly welcome in the clinic when we had our bloods taken when requested. I suppose we were having COVID tests, and we knew that was a fascinating thing before the general public had them. I remember doing assemblies down through this camera to students, showing them how we were doing the testing. I suppose the only odd thing was, I suppose, in the midst of it all, when we had to take the somewhat under our coat sometimes, the COVID test down to the priority post box. All the neighbours would think maybe we had COVID all the time. I would say was the only slightly odd part of the process. Otherwise, yeah, it was also like coming in. We got a friendly welcome, signed in, and it never seemed busy or crowded. And it was everyone was very friendly and happy to talk.
Thank you. And so what would you say to someone who is listening now and thinking about doing a clinical trial, about taking part?
I mean, if you're interested in science, you're interested in biology, interested in how your body works, ultimately it's a no-brainer to get a vaccine and to get ahead of the game, if from a sort of selfish point of view. But from an altruistic point of view, it's a vocational, I guess we're vocational professionals, many of us here, and everyone would like to do that little bit. I think it's as simple as that, really, and just ask lots of questions of those that clearly know what they're talking about.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for staying to the end if people have got questions for you. That was really kind of helpful, and thank you again for your kind of your support during the study and making the vaccine happen. And so now we're going to move to Kelly Turner, who is the lead nurse and sister for the vaccine research team in Bristol, who's going to be telling us about some of the trials that we have ongoing at the moment.
Thanks, Radhika. So whilst when we started, the vaccine and testing research team is fairly new compared with other research teams that we have in our hospital. And it was primarily off of the back of the pandemic that we kind of formed. And so a lot of our early work was based around COVID vaccine studies, but I'm pleased to say that we've kind of moved away from that now, and we are in a position to be able to offer other studies that are for other particular diseases and conditions, looking at kind of longer term and short term health. So our first study that we are currently running, that I'm going to talk about, is called the EMBRACE study. So the EMBRACE study is open to adults that are over the age of 60. And to qualify, you need to have had a urinary tract infection or a water infection within the past 2 years, which has needed antibiotic treatment. So we have been working with a number of GP practices, letting them know that we have this study open. And we've also been publicising it through the social media via the hospital kind of network. And so people are informed about the study. And if they're interested, then they go on to the EMBRACE website to register their interest. We then receive an email to let sort of our team know that somebody is interested in taking part in the study. We'll then contact that person and go through a series of questions, just asking them general bits and pieces about their overall health and kind of information about when they last had their water infection and what antibiotics were used, etc. So if we go through all of those particular questions and everything seems to be good to go, then we invite people to come in to have a screening visit with us in our kind of research unit, where we go through a variety of different activities, including kind of like a physical exam and a questionnaire and kind of a little mini kind of test to see how far people can walk, etc. And if everything goes okay and they pass all of those tests as such, we then offer the person the opportunity to be vaccinated. So they either receive either a vaccine against a particular bacteria called E. coli, or they receive a placebo. And now in this case, the placebo is a saline solution. Once the person is vaccinated, they go home, complete a kind of few days worth of questionnaires and diaries, and we will then invite that person back in after 4 weeks just to check on their progress to see how they are. And then following on from that, we do regular phone calls to keep in contact with them to see whether they've had any particular issues or problems, or whether they've been diagnosed with any urinary tract infections, or if they've needed a hospital admission. And this is the big thing really with this study, is that the whole point of the study is to prevent hospitalizations from what's known as urinary sepsis. So we know as people get older, they are more susceptible to urinary tract infections. And one particular nasty bug, E. coli, can actually have quite serious consequences for this, which will often end up with people being hospitalized, particularly if they get recurrent infections. And so the whole idea of this study is, hopefully, if we can vaccinate people against E. coli, it will prevent serious kind of disease where they may end up being very sick and need hospital treatment. So that's our first study. Our second study, in complete contrast, is called CM Victory, and it's aimed at young women aged 16 to 40 years old. To qualify for this study, you need to have contact with small children under the age of 5 for at least 8 hours a week. So why are we looking to vaccinate young women against a particular virus called CMV, which is short for cytomegalovirus? So we know that cytomegalovirus has been around for some time. It was discovered in kind of the 1950s. To date, there is no vaccine for this virus. It can circulate within the population and not cause too much trouble, except in two conditions. The first one is if somebody becomes severely compromised with their immune system as a result of needing a transplant, for example. So we know that if people contract the virus at that point, they can become very sick. The other condition or situation where we know that CMV can actually have quite serious consequences is in early pregnancy. So CMV is one of those viruses that can unfortunately lead to birth defects and abnormalities from a developmental point of view for babies if the mother contracts CMV whilst they're pregnant. It's not particularly very well known about within this country. Just to give you a little bit of context, 1 in 1,000 babies will be born with having some kind of effects from CMV in comparison to, say, Down syndrome, where it's 1 in 1,100. So there is a charity called CMV Action, and they are campaigning to have more awareness about CMV. And so they've done various polls, and they report that 98% of women will have heard of Down syndrome, but only 33% will have actually heard of CMV. So we know that it's a virus that can cause quite significant problems. And so potentially we are offering a vaccine to young women to help prevent those potential issues becoming a problem if they contract CMV kind of during pregnancy. Now we know that CMV tends to lurk in young people and it can be passed on through kind of bodily secretions. So that's things such as saliva, tears, urine. And so when you're looking after a small baby, you definitely come into contact with a lot of those things. So hopefully we are looking to open this study next month. And so these are two different areas that kind of like we are currently working in. So I think that pretty much sums up the two studies that we've got currently. That we do have others, but I could go on all night. So what I will do is I will hand over to the next section. So I'm just trying to have a little look to see who that is actually. Sorry, Rachel, you might need to give me a hand on who's talking next.
Yeah, no problem. You're going to hand over to Hannah now, who's going to talk about the participation in vaccine research and how people can get involved.
Thanks, Rachel. So I am Hannah Brooks. I work in the vaccine and testing research team. I am the patient and public involvement lead and also trial coordinator. So now you've heard a bit more about the exciting vaccine research studies that are ongoing in the team. You might be wondering, how can I sign up to take part in vaccine research? So that's what I'm going to talk to you a bit more about now. So a common theme for our our previous studies, which were, as Kelly mentioned, predominantly COVID-19 vaccine related, is that once a study received approvals and the sponsor gave the green light, they would have a tight recruitment deadline. So we need to set up a recruitment plan and identify the first point of contact for interest in recruitment to the study. So this provided us with an opportunity to develop a participant vaccine database, which we could contribute to with our previous participants. So for our newer studies, we've contacted previous participants with details of the database. And to build the volunteer database, we worked with the research and innovation team, and I submitted a data protection impact assessment form to information governance for approvals. The purpose of this database is to build a community of volunteers interested in participating in vaccine research and to be kept updated of the results of vaccine research studies. and it will provide a collaborative approach to promote equity, inclusion and diversity within the community. So we hope to send out regular newsletters to individuals signed up to the database to inform volunteers of opportunities for participation in vaccine research studies open to recruitment, as well as updates and results of ongoing research studies within the team. So to sign up to this database, you can scan the QR code, which we'll provide at the end of the talk, on a smartphone or tablet device, and you can complete the consent form with your details. You'll then have the option to choose what communications you wish to receive, whether it's opportunities for participating in studies open to recruitment or results of research studies. And we'll contact you on an annual basis to review whether the details we'll hold for you are correct, and your details will be retained for a 5-year period. And it's also important to note that your sign up is completely voluntary and you can withdraw at any time by emailing us. So we've attended public engagement events to promote vaccine research and provide awareness of how to be involved and take part in research studies. And some of these events we've attended include the Futures event held at SS Great Britain, University of Bristol Freshers Fair, and most recently we had a stall at Southmead Hospital for the Your Health Check event organised by North Bristol Trust. So not only does the database provide an opportunity to participate in vaccine research studies, but it also provides opportunities for contribution to development and the operational processes of studies. So rather than participating or being a volunteer in a research study, you'd contribute to the research study from a patient and public involvement perspective. So for example, you might sign up to be a study but find out you're ineligible to take part, but we could still provide you with an opportunity to be involved in public and patient involvement in the study. And that leads me on to my next topic of discussion, which is patient and public involvement. So as I said earlier, I'm the patient and public involvement lead in the vaccine and testing research team. And patient and public involvement in research refers to an active partnership between members of the public and researchers. So this means that members of the public work alongside the research team and are actively involved in contributing to the research process as advisors and possibly co-researchers. So it means actively working in partnership with patients and members of the public to plan, manage, design and carry out research alongside the public rather than for or to them. And the UK standards for PPI support the inclusion of communicating, working together, providing inclusive opportunities and support and learning, as well as training opportunities. So researchers and clinicians may not have had first experience of the illness, disease or service that they wish to research. So public involvement representatives can therefore provide researchers with insights into what it is like to live with a particular illness and what it's like to be a user of a treatment or health service. So these insights can help to make health research more relevant to the needs of patients, carers and service users. So ensures that the people, public and patients remain the central focus of healthcare research. So within the team, we have set up a public and patient involvement group, and we have had virtual group sessions and contributors to review study materials such as proposals, consent forms, participant information sheets and advertising materials. So I send those to the contributors before the meeting, allow them a suitable time to review the documents, and then we discuss the feedback with them during a virtual online session. So, and during that session, study sponsors and study teams would then take the feedback provided by the PPI contributors and use the feedback to develop the study materials further to produce a finalized version before the study is approved and opens to recruitment. So there are many types of roles a patient involvement member can have. For example, one of our PPI contributors is a current member of a trial steering committee, and there's other roles which include reading safety data during safety pauses, carrying out interviews with patient, public members and research staff to gather views on the impact of PPI and what could be done to improve PPI, and also running presenting posters on behalf of a research team for the research study, so working alongside the research team. So on the call today, we have one of our PPI contributors, Mary, who I'm very happy to introduce. So thank you very much, Mary, for coming today. I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Well, actually, if you want to introduce yourself first, that would be great.
So I'm Mary. I'm a public contributor for several research projects, and I live in Exeter.
Thank you, Mary. So first of all, I'd like to ask how you got involved with PPI.
I got involved in PPI because in 2013, thanks to a bulletin, it was called "Being Involved Devon," where I joined it, and I received a newsletter with information with the latest PPI opportunities. One of them was an important study in mental health run by McPean Foundation. And so I joined the focus group and then I joined the steering group for the LEAP as a LEAP member, Lived Experience Advisory Panel for the partners to study.
Okay, thank you. And why do you do PPI?
Being a PPI member makes me feel as doing something really worthwhile. We're contributing in the future of research and for the research and for the future generations. Enjoying being PPI member very much in research has given me a lot. I learned new skills. I travel around England, doing focus group meetings, and I gave my feedback. That has been very sorry, using my experience, I gave feedback. Given feedback on materials. This on the several part of a study, of a research study, and enjoying every part of it.
That's great to hear. Thank you. And why are you interested in supporting vaccine research?
Because I think vaccinations are the results of years of research and lots of work from researchers. And I think that without with vaccination we can eradicate the lots of illnesses like COVID-19 that cause lots of the pandemics and lots of death. So we can eradicate these illnesses and live for longer lives as well.
Okay. And finally, what would you say to someone considering contributing as a PPI member on a research study? Any advice or things to be aware of?
Just to be aware of. And I had a very positive experience all the way through. I just suggest people to take part because everybody is very friendly, and your contribution is always very valuable and very helpful. And even if you the first times when you take part in meetings, you haven't got questions or opinions, it doesn't matter. They come after a while. So take part and contribute to the research with your opinions and your feedback and your experience.
Thank you very much, Mary. It's lovely to speak to you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. That was really good. I hope everybody's enjoyed all the information they've been given this evening. We're going to move over to our question and answer session now. So if anybody does have any questions, you should be able to put your hand up using the raise hand function on the screen. If you can't, you may be able to type into the chat box because I can't always see everybody. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask to start off with? Oh, amazing. Samantha, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
So thanks everyone who's spoken tonight. My question is for Justin, school teacher who you mentioned briefly that you were doing it online with the students to show them what you were doing. Did the students seem quite engaged with that? Were they interested in the research that you were taking part in? Oh, you're on mute, Justin. You're on mute, Justin. Start again.
Oh, there we go. It's been a while since we've been doing this, isn't it? I should be au fait with this by now. Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. I suppose that was some of the weirdest things of COVID was I remember doing an open evening here, and there's just, as it is tonight, nobody outside the window, very, very quiet. The students have been very engaged, actually. I mean, I'd like to think my students would be interested in my biology classes. I suppose year 9s, year 10s, sixth form in particular, they go off, many of them, to go and do biology medical careers. So yeah, hopefully they found it interesting. And talking about things like with the swabbing, it was stuff that nobody else was doing, so it was quite innovative. And obviously I would hope that hopefully they were interesting. Maybe you'll have to ask them.
Thanks. So I think it was really cool that you shared that with the students, all about exposure and all that. So that's really cool. Thanks.
Thanks.
It is really interesting to kind of like see how the students felt about it, actually, to hear what they thought about it. So maybe we'll have to ask some students. Does anybody else have any questions they might like to ask? Oh, I've got Virginia. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, it's for Kelly and possibly for Hannah as well. I was interested because I'm 77 in this embrace, taking part in it, but I was not brought up with computers, and this is really a new world to me. I don't know what scanning a code is, so I wouldn't know how to contact you. Do I do it via my GP?
So we do have 3 GP surgeries. And that might help a bit, mightn't it? So we do have 3 GP surgeries in the Bristol area that are sending out information, and we do have another 3 GPs that are coming online. At the end of our meeting today, we are actually going to put up 2 bits of information for you. One is the QR code, which you can scan using your phone, which is to kind of potentially register with the database. But what we're also going to do is give you the link for the website for the Embrace study, so that you can see what kind of that you need to put into the search engine, so that you can see. I would have thought also that if you just typed in Embrace vaccine trial, it's likely to come up as a hit on Google for you. But we will put information on the end. But you can, if you don't get any joy with that, you can also then contact us again, like Rachel said, and we can contact you directly about it. You don't have to come through that particular platform.
Just a minute, when you say contact us again, how do I do that? I don't do phones. I don't.
This lady needs a postal
I
address.
write letters in handwriting.
What I could do is I could give you our so Rachel, do we have an email attached to Virginia for her logging on?
We do. Virginia, what we'll do is we'll drop you an email afterwards with some details on how to get in touch with the team. Is that okay with you?
That's fine. Email I can do. Thank you very much.
Perfect. That's absolutely great. So at the end of this session, once we've finished kind of talking, just as Adam says thank you very much to everybody and says good night, we will put up a quick slide just giving you details on the website and the QR code, and I'll also email them out to you all tomorrow so that you've got them on your emails, and at the same time give you the contact details for Kelly, Virginia, so that you can access them. All right. John, you've put your not a problem at all, Virginia. John, you've put your hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Am I unmuted? Okay. Now it's yeah. I was in the same situation as my age tells me that the reason I just forgot what her name was is because of my age. Anyhow, one thing I want to say is it's been a brilliant experience for me, because when they rang me up, I said, "Oh yeah," because we were getting a lot of scam calls, and I had to interview this. I interviewed this poor interviewer who was a doctor and tried to put him off, and he said, "No, I'm really a doctor. I'm trying to organize this thing." And I said, "Okay, I guess you are." But that was humorous. But I was so pleased to take part in the thing, because I was over the 75 mark, whatever it was. They hadn't tested COVID on everybody else. I'm originally an astronautical engineer, but so therefore science to me is what it's all about. And this to me was how you do it. And I got, it turns out, the meningitis jab. But as the nurse explained to me, it was a very positive thing, because it was a win-win. Because at my age, sepsis is a danger, and I'm getting the 2 shots of maybe the COVID, but guaranteed of one of the 2. So it was a very positive thing. The other thing that was brilliant about the whole trial was how I had contact with by a phone call, senior nurse, doctor, whatever, of giving me information, because I wound up, there was a massive bruise 10 days after the injection, but they cleared it up of why it was. And it was that kind of care and attention. And I was just knocked out by the whole experience. And I would be glad to take part in any other vaccine program, because as a scientist, it's obvious. I mean, I'm with Justin. It's guaranteed to me that if we've got science behind us, we can not do everything, but we can do a lot of things. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I think Adam's going to want to come in here and just say something to you. So, Adam, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to John. I thought it was a fantastic few words that he shared with us about his experience, as was Justin's. And sometimes people say to me, well, why on earth would a parent want to put forward their child to be involved in a vaccine trial? And my response to that question is that actually now we've been doing these trials for over 15 years in Bristol. What we frequently experience is that families who've been involved in our trials ring us up and they say to us, we've just had another baby, and we are just wondering if you've got a vaccine trial that we can take part in, because it was such a positive experience last time around. So I think you actually can build a culture in a city like Bristol. People talk to each other and their experiences, and really become a place that is the place to be at the front of the queue, as Justin put it, but also taking part in science and helping us make progress and discoveries. And it's really, for us in the health service, it's really valuable that we have a community that are behind us and support us in doing this, not just by participating, but by communicating in the way that John and Justin just have about the value for them of being able to take part in this kind of work. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. That's really very, very true. Does anybody else have any other questions or any comments they wanted to make over tonight? Oh, Samantha, do you want to come back in?
Something that John said just now, actually, which I thought was quite interesting, was about how the two vaccines that you might get, they were both good, and they were still good vaccines that you so you would be happy whichever one you got randomized into. And I thought that was interesting because, Kelly, you mentioned you've got a study that you're running at the moment that's placebo based, and I just wondered, in terms of trial design, how you navigate those conversations where it's maybe not as attractive in terms of, well, it's win-win, you're going to get a good thing or a good thing in a different way. So yeah, just it's always intrigued me.
Yeah, it's always quite a difficult kind of thing to broach sometimes. It's when you have two comparators, it's kind of, you know, a lot of people are obviously quite interested in that. But when you're telling them that they could have a bit of salty water, or they could potentially have the vaccine, I think people that volunteer for vaccine studies actually are kind of the mindset in terms of, well, if I get it, I get it, and if I don't, I don't. But I'm definitely not going to get it if I don't kind of participate in the first place. And so whilst sometimes it may be disappointing if you find out that actually you haven't had the vaccine, I think people recognize the fact that we are not going to be able to progress unless we have something to benchmark against. And so we are very careful to kind of ensure that people are aware of the fact that, you know, if certainly with our placebo studies, that there is a possibility, and obviously people can withdraw from the study at any point. There is no kind of, you know, if you sign on the dotted line and then you change your mind 2 days later, that's fine. It's, you know, we understand that, like, it's something that needs careful consideration, particularly if you're kind of thinking in terms of, like, with kind of risks to your own health. But generally, on the whole, we find that people are quite receptive, and even if it is a kind of the placebo and kind of related trials, that they're still kind of willing to take part in those.
Thanks, Kelly. I suppose moving on from that, like, and this is possibly a question for Rajeka or Adam, but how do you choose which studies you actually start, which trials you kind of go for? Do you come up with them yourself, or do they come through to you from somewhere else? How does that work?
So it's a mixture. So the trials that are done are really based on for us, the infections that are kind of relevant and need treating. So for example, we have new vaccines that are probably going to be coming out for RSV, which is a viral infection which causes an illness like flu that actually causes quite a lot of hospitalizations in babies and also in older adults. And that's been recognised as a growing problem. Now we have flu vaccines and COVID-19 vaccines. So there's interest in people developing those vaccines. So then we may get asked to help support the clinical trials for those vaccines. There may be a need for a vaccine, like a vaccine for Mpox, that was formerly known as monkeypox, because we had this recent outbreak in Europe and other parts of the world, and vaccines for that are limited. So we need more vaccines. So some of it will be as kind of a reaction to that. And there's also the studies that we do after a vaccine has been improved to make sure that it's acceptable. So, for example, we designed a study ourselves where we offered people flu vaccine alongside COVID-19 vaccine to work out whether it's going to be safe and give a good immune response given together or alone. So which means that people can now go along and get both vaccines at once, which means they only have one appointment and only kind of hopefully one period when they're feeling kind of a bit sore after having a vaccine instead of two over the winter. So it's a mix of kind of the need for treating new infectious diseases and to make vaccines deliverable.
Yeah, I mean, not much to add to that, except to say that, of course, that means that we have funding for these studies from multiple different sources. Sometimes it's directly from the government. Sometimes it'll be from a vaccine manufacturer. Sometimes it will be from a charitable foundation with an interest in a particular infectious disease. So it's quite a complex portfolio of things. And I think the other thing to say is that, you know, we get asked to do a lot of studies, we do look at them and we do think about it. We have to prioritize and choose to some degree. That's influenced by the capacity that we've got. Because we've got a local network of sites, we've got a lot more capacity than if we were just doing studies in Bristol. We work in partnership with other local centres as well as across the country. And then, of course, we have to look at the protocol and make sure that it's something that we actually feel we can deliver on and that it's sensibly designed and something that people will accept. And that's where the PPI work that Hannah's leading is really important, because we do need to know from people who are potentially going to be taking part in a study that from what they're being asked to do is kind of acceptable and manageable and important. So that all of those things come into the mix. Thank you.
That's cool. Thank you very much for answering that, Adam. Is there any other questions from anybody else? No? Because I've got one more question that I would love to ask, and it's actually for Justin and Mary. How easy was it for you to sign up to the vaccine trials and to the PPI programs that we do? Was it really straightforward, or was there a bit of to and fro? How easy was it for you?
Well, if I go first, then as I said, we were in the garden. I think we had a glass of wine. It got to 5 o'clock, so we all had. And I think my wife did it for both of us. I think she was filling it in for herself, and I was, and then she filled it in for me. And it was very easy. It wasn't much to fill in actually. And then, as I said, we had a very nice phone call, and within a couple of weeks we were in clinic, finding out whether we had COVID or not with that first blood test, which to allow us onto the trial. I suppose one thing I didn't say earlier was when we became unblinded. Now we've learned a bit more about it. That was probably one of the other moments of the trial when that was sort of later in the evening, one evening on the sofa, and we were suddenly old enough to allow us to have the actual vaccine. So we then found out, if you're interested, I did have the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, and my wife had the meningitis one. At which point, of course, she then hastily booked herself in for her own COVID jab, which she was then allowed on the NHS scheme. Very easy though.
Really good. That's really good. What about you, Mary? Is it quite easy to sign up for the PPI groups?
Yes, it is. I received a newsletter from People in Research for Bristol, and there was asked me to apply for, and there was an email address for Anna Brooks, and I contacted her, and she answered back, I think the day after, and I was invited to a focus group to give some feedback on information sheets and leaflets. So I found it was very easy, and yes, it was very it was very good.
Ah, that's brilliant. That's really good to know. It's nice to know that it's a quick and easy thing to be able to do. So, you can do it while you're having a glass of wine, or you can do it while you're on the train on the way home. John, you've just popped your hand up again. Did you want to add to that? Because obviously you did the COVID-19 trial as well. So.
Yeah, it was after I mentioned that I quizzed this poor doctor about what he was doing, because I was used to having scam calls. But eventually he asked, I agree that he was legitimate, and he went through some various questions, and I said, I answered them quickly. And he said, right, you may be getting a phone call soon. And I said, well, I'm a mathematician. What probability do you think that this is going to be? Because I can't be bothered to wait for something if it's going to be a 20% probability. And he said 100%. And I don't, as a mathematician, that's not possible, but it did happen. That was all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, John. It's lovely to hear all the different various experiences that you've had, and it's really nice to know how you guys have felt about it. So if there aren't any other questions, then I might just pop up this last slide and let Adam just say thank you very much to everyone for joining us, and we can let you go slightly early. You can go on, have an earlier dinner.
Okay.
Go.
Fine. For those that are QR code minded, there's the QR code. and the link that you could click on if you wanted to join the Embrace study. For Virginia, I think we're going to be sending you an email, so hopefully you can hear from us. It's very privileged for me to be able to top and tail this session. I've very much enjoyed hearing both the presentations from colleagues, but also the comments and reflections from everyone on the call that's contributed. And I hope you can spread the word about this to your friends and neighbours and so on. I think we'll be doing more of these sessions in the future, and we would certainly welcome participation. We want to make Bristol continue to be a leading centre in the country for this very important area of work. And one of the benefits of the COVID pandemic, which has been enormously harmful to all of us in many ways, is that it has really accelerated the rate of vaccine development. And I think we're going to see some very important new vaccine developments coming through in the next few years, and the need to do a lot more trials to prove that these new vaccines work and that they're safe and effective. So Bristol will be playing our part in that important work, which of course is important not only for the population of this country, but throughout the world. So thank you all very much for your contributions, for joining this evening, and I hope we'll be seeing and talking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Go and enjoy your dinner.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.